Look around you. Where are you sitting right now? What's in your pocket? What's over your head? You're sitting in a chair. There's most likely a phone in your pocket, and there's a roof over your head. But what do all these things have in common? I mean, you can't make a phone call with a chair, and you really can't use a phone to hide you under the ring. But all these things have something in common, and almost everything in our society does. They're all made up of the same substance. That substance being metal. From the cars we drive, the planes we ride, to the pencils we use, almost everything has something made of metal in it. Now, we tend to think of metal as this hard, shiny silver object that we can bend, weld, and make almost anything with. But that's not true. Metal isn't just that. It's extremely important in our biochemical world and in our body. Throughout my speech today, I'm going to examine the metals in our body. And I'm going to say why they're important and what needs to be done about it. So my what if. What if the world focused on iron deficiency? So as I stated, there's metal in our blood. One metal being iron. So, let's see why I'm asking about iron. There's billions of diseases out there now, and even more are being discovered daily. So why am I focusing on just one? And I'll tell you why. 2 billion people, over 30% of the world's population, is affected with this malnutrition disease. 2 billion people. So shouldn't we do something to stop it? Well, to actually figure out why we're going to stop it, we need to first see why iron's important. So we all know we need oxygen to survive. We breathe in oxygen and we exhale CO2. But it's a little more complicated than that. Cellular respiration. When we breathe in oxygen, the oxygen is stored in our lungs. And when the oxygen is stored in our lungs, it's held there until blood comes and carries that oxygen throughout our body. Every single cell in our body needs oxygen and glucose, energy and oxygen. But without this, the cells would die. Now, the blood, let's look more deeply into it. Red blood cells specifically are the ones that are moving the oxygen. And these red blood cells are made up of hemoglobins, which are helping move the oxygen. And the hemoglobins are mostly made up of iron and other enzymes. So, with hemoglobins moving the oxygen through our blood and made up of iron, we can draw the conclusion that iron is important because we need the iron to move the oxygen to our cells so that we can live. So, how do we get iron in our body? Well, by food, of course. You can eat iron-rich foods, like leafy green vegetables or meat. Anything almost to deal with protein. And as you can see in this picture, these are some iron-rich foods that you can eat. But let's look at iron deficiency, the actual topic of my speech today. Iron deficiency. Well, as the name implies, it means you don't have enough iron in your blood. More specifically, iron deficiency can be classified as iron deficiency anemia. And so, as you can see in this picture here, the normal amount of red blood cells is significantly higher than the anemic amount of red blood cells. This means that more oxygen can be carried throughout the blood because there's more red blood cells. But if you were to have iron deficiency anemia, you would have less red blood cells and less oxygen move to your body and less go to your cells. Some symptoms include weakness, fatigue, sometimes craving unnutritional foods such as ice and dirt, and in extreme cases, death. So let's look at why I'm talking about iron deficiency. And as I stated, 2 billion people have it. And we think of these diseases to be only in these smaller, poorer regions, in developing countries. But as you can see in this map here, you have the developed countries of Russia and China have significant amount of iron deficiency cases. They're also being affected by this disease. And why are we not looking at this? It's not just the poorer and developing regions of Africa, but Eastern Europe, Asia, these rich countries have it. And why? It's because we're not focusing on it. So again, my question, what if the world focused on iron deficiency? Now, I talked about how many people had it. let's look at the death rates. How many people actually survive after it? Iron deficiency has a low death rate for who have it, but it does cause an amount of symptoms that become painful and annoying to the patient. And also it can be a sort of a sub or a helper disease with other big diseases. And iron deficiency can actually amplify some symptoms of other major diseases. So if you look at this graph, over 30 million people die of iron deficiency every year. 30 million. Let's look at one region in particular, the Sahel region of Africa, just under the Sahara Desert. In the Sahel region of Africa, every year, 475,000 children die. Imagine 5 Columbias, each one filled with children. And every year, they're gone, dead, because of some disease, some malnutrition illness that we aren't looking at. So, what's our focus now? How are we actually looking at it? To examine this, we need to look at our foods and how we know how iron's in our food. As you can see in the nutrition facts label here, you have the minerals in it, the proteins, the sugars, etc. But if you look closely, you can see on this side the words are larger. They take up more space. And on this side, the words are smaller. They take up less space. Well, which side is iron on? It's on the left side, the right side, your right side. That means that you guys aren't looking at your iron as much. You're more focusing on the protein, the sugars, and the fats of your food. And why is this? I mean, you need to have nutritional food. So let's look at another one. Another example of nutrition fact label. This one here. Again, 60%, if not more, is taken up by proteins, sugars, carbohydrates, and fats. And down on the bottom is little iron. Still not seen. The nutrition is not being focused on. Now on to my final nutrition facts label. Nowhere can we find iron. Where is it? Now, it might not have iron in the actual meal, but it also doesn't have cholesterol, sodium, proteins, fats, but it still leaves that spot blank. It has the name of it, but we don't see iron or any other minerals. Why is this? Why are we not focusing on iron? So as I was doing my research, of course, I looked up nutrition facts education on Google Images. And some of the first results, I had 3 results pop up. One, from an organization. They teach you these nutrition facts, but again, they leave out this part of the iron, the vitamins, the minerals that you need. Next, I looked from a sports scientist webpage on this funny infographic of a Pac-Man video game. It talks about calories, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, but nowhere does it state iron. And then the FDA popped up. And in the FDA, one of the first choices was the fats, the saturated fats, cholesterol, sodium, carbohydrates, and dietary fiber. Again, nowhere is there vitamins, nowhere is there minerals, and nowhere is there iron. So our education system is flawed. But how can we actually prevent iron deficiency? So that leads me to the answer part. There's 2 ways we can fix it. And one is through developmental aid. But before I get to how developmental aid will help, let's look at our focus on developmental aid now and other diseases. So we focus developmental aid on HIV and other diseases, health systems and other infectious diseases. But nowhere does it say that we focus our developmental aid on malnutrition. In fact, 2 million people, around 2 million people were diagnosed with HIV in 2014. 2 billion people have iron deficiency. Over 1,000 times the amount. But, let's look at the funding. HIV and AIDS, $2 billion is given to it. And iron deficiency, $250 million. 1,000 times more people have iron deficiency, and 10 times less money is actually given to the people who have it. Now, I'm not saying that we should get rid of our aid to other diseases altogether, but I'm just pointing out that we're focusing on other diseases instead of the ones that are more common and in other regions. So let's look at the countries individually. The U.S. gives more than any other region in the world. with the second place giving less than half of what the U.S. does in developmental aid. So developmental aid budgets right now are pretty low. And it looks like the developmental aid, or humanitarian assistance, of giving iron foods isn't going to work out too well. As you can see in this graph here, it's been decreasing over time. And who's to say that it will increase? Because countries right now are having economic problems and they won't be able to afford foreign aid. Now, foreign aid versus the military. Countries right now, especially the U.S., spend more on the military. In the U.S. alone, 60 times more is spent on the military than developmental assistance. Twice as much on farm subsidies and developmental assistance, and twice as much on health care. Why is this? Actually, Gallup polls, as you can see on the bottom of this, ask people a survey, what they think the world should give. And this goes back to my education point earlier. What we think that we're giving and how we're helping right now. They asked the public, how much do you think the U.S. is giving in developmental assistance and humanitarian assistance? The public responded 10%. Or they said 25%. They then asked, how much do you think should be moved? The public responded 10%. So they want to cut. But in fact, only 0.6% of our budget is actually given in foreign aid. Significantly less than what people think, and they still want cuts. Even if we were to give the developmental aid, let's say we increase it, we give more. 82.1% of developmental aid is lost, not showed up, while only 14.5% is actually given. In this graph here, you can see the unevenness of how much we spend and how much we actually give to the countries. In fact, in one example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, $7.5 billion was declared given, while $5 billion was lost, and of the $2.5 billion given left, most of it consisted of debt relief. So let's say you all give me $100. There's about 10 of you in the room right now. That's $1,000. Of your $1,000, $820 will go to my pocket or be lost. The other $300 or $30 will go to some friends who I owe, and the other little bit will go to the cause you actually gave me the money for. Where's the equalness in that? There's none. So that leads me to the final answer, and the one that's probably one of the most controversial issues in the U.S. itself, and that is GMOs. Now, when we hear that word, we squirm in our chairs. We think GMOs are these dangerous, cancer-causing things. In fact, they're not. They're actually successful. They had a case of golden rice in Southeast Asia. There was a huge case of vitamin A deficiency, and children were blind and dying because of it. So this company created golden rice. And what golden rice did was it increased its amount of nutrients it could carry. What if we were to do this with iron? Could we create crops that could increase the amount of iron they carry so people end up getting more iron in their body? It only takes one seed for the people of the rice to grow and have a huge amount of people saved by this. So it would only take one seed of the new GMO crop of iron if we were to create it. Now, GMOs, as I stated, are controversial. People think they cause cancer. The NIH, WHO, the Philippine National Institute of Health, all stated they're safe. They have some of the most intensively tested scientific research, and everything in it is safe, and there's not been a single cause. But you think, oh, I heard stories that GMOs cause cancer. Every single one of those stories has been proven wrong because of false evidence and non-scientific or no evidence at all. So in conclusion, let's answer the question. What if the world focused on iron deficiency? Well, the thing is, we need to. We need to focus on iron deficiency. And if we were to focus on iron deficiency, it would not be through the developmental aid part, but through GMO. So, think back to that question before, and all around you, and the metals being there. Well, you could be in the middle of nowhere, and there would still be metals around you, for they're in your body. And more importantly, is iron. Thank you.